You've probably heard about a company having a bad quarter, right? But what happens when an entire industry seems to catch a cold? When a financial illness starts spreading from one business to the next, it can actually infect an entire economy. And yeah, there's a name for this. And understanding it is absolutely key to knowing what makes an economy healthy.
It sounds a little weird to ask, but can a factory get a fever? Well, in a way, yeah, it can. It can overheat with rising costs, or it can catch a chill when demand suddenly drops. The symptoms? They're pretty clear. Production slows to a crawl, the finances start looking weak, and morale just plummets. So, what do we call this economic ailment?
There's a name for it: industrial sickness. That's the official term for a business that's so financially unhealthy, it's basically on life support. And just like a real virus, it almost never stays in one place.
Okay, so how do you actually diagnose this condition? What are the specific symptoms that turn a company that's just struggling into one that's officially declared sick? Let's take a look at the criteria.
Well, according to the Reserve Bank of India, this isn't just about having a bad month. The official diagnosis is for a chronic condition. We're talking about a company that's losing cash for one full year and is expected to keep losing it for two more. Think about that. The company is literally eating away at its own foundation, its capital, just to stay afloat. You know, what's interesting is that sickness looks different depending on who you are. For an investor, it's simple. The dividends stop coming. For the business owner, it's the nightmare of seeing their company collapse. And for a banker, it's a loan that's probably never getting paid back. It's a failure that hits every single person involved, just from a different angle.
All right, every illness has a cause, right? Industrial sickness is no different. So, what are the germs and pathogens of the economic world? Well, they really break down into two main categories. Think of it this way. You've got your internal causes. These are like a company's bad habits or pre-existing conditions, things that, in theory, are within its control. Then you've got your external causes. These are more like an unpredictable virus or a natural disaster, factors from the outside world that the company has absolutely no power over.
So let's look inside the company first. One of the most common internal causes, honestly, it's often just plain old mismanagement. Bad financial planning, using machinery that's totally outdated, or letting relationships with workers fall apart. All of this can cripple a company from the inside out and lead to things like strikes, sky-high costs, and a total breakdown in productivity. But then you have all the stuff that's completely out of their hands. I mean, a company could be perfectly managed, but what if there's a nationwide power shortage? Or the government suddenly changes the tax rules? Or a huge recession hits and suddenly nobody is buying anything? Even the healthiest company can catch a really bad cold. It's a powerful reminder that no business operates in a bubble.
So, one company gets sick. Why should the rest of us care? Well, this is where this whole thing gets truly dangerous. Because industrial sickness is contagious. It spreads. When a big industrial unit fails, it doesn't just quietly disappear. It sends shockwaves through the entire economic system. It's like a domino effect, and the consequences can be absolutely devastating for everyone. Just think about the ripple effect for a second. Workers lose their jobs. The companies that supplied parts lose their biggest customer. The banks that gave out loans are now stuck with bad debt. And the government? It loses out on all that tax revenue. All the while, you have these valuable resources, buildings, expensive machinery just sitting there, rusting away. That's how one sick company can start to infect the entire economic body. So, if industrial sickness is the disease, what's the cure? Let's pop open the economic medicine cabinet and look at the treatments designed to nurse a sick company, or maybe even a whole industry, back to health.
There are a few main treatments on the table. First, you have rehabilitation. Think of this like financial physical therapy, restructuring loans and cutting interest rates to give the company some breathing room. Then there are mergers. That's kind of like an organ transplant, where a healthy company absorbs the sick one. And in the most extreme cases, the government itself steps in, either taking over temporarily or just nationalizing the company completely to stop a total collapse.
To actually perform these economic surgeries, governments have developed a pretty specific toolkit. This includes laws that let them take over mismanaged companies and tax breaks to make mergers more attractive. They've also created special bodies, like India's former Board for Industrial and Financial Reconstruction, or the current National Company Law Tribunal. These are basically the economic doctors who have to decide if a sick company can be saved or if it's time to, well, pull the plug. Now, when we talk about this, our minds might jump to massive factories and huge corporations. But the reality is actually pretty different. In a country like India,
A staggering 99% of all sick units are in the small-scale sector. We're talking about the smaller businesses that are the real backbone of the economy. They just have fewer cash reserves and less access to loans, which makes them way more vulnerable to this disease. And all of this leads to the most critical question of all. We know the diagnoses, the causes, and the treatments, but sometimes the cure can be more expensive than the disease itself. So is every sick company actually worth saving? Or is it sometimes healthier for the overall economy to let some businesses fail? That is the billion-dollar question with no easy answer.